Good evening and welcome to the University of Wisconsin Division of Extension December 8th Beef Special Edition. My name is Sandy Stitchen and I am your facilitator this evening. Our presenters are Amanda Kaufman, Bill Halfman, Carolyn Eady, and Ryan Steary. Our objectives for this evening are to increase awareness of the decision-making tools available at our University of Wisconsin Division of Extension Livestock website. And we want to do that by presenting them during a virtual meeting in order to increase the user's comfort level. Specifically, we're going to talk about the newest tools that determine forage needs and match the forage inventory to the animals, as well as increase the awareness of what it costs to raise heifers while accounting for all of the potential expenses occurred while raising them. Now I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Bill Halfman to begin our presentations.
UW Extension Agriculture Agent in Monroe County. I'm going to co-present the first decision tool along with Carolyn Eady. And Carolyn, would you like to introduce yourself as we get started?
Greetings, I'm Carolyn Eady. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're really excited for you all to be here and for us to showcase a few of these things for you. Right now, you should be seeing our new Livestock Topic Hub. That link is actually down in the chat, so if you'd like to save that for another time, you can do that as well. I'd just like to show you across the top are some different categories, and if you would like to contact us later after this evening's program, you can find all about us in the People section. And then as Bill highlighted, there are some topics and events and news things, and we'll be populating and creating this website as we go along. We're in the process of moving over the information from our FYI sites. If you are familiar with those, this is where all that information will be housed. If you go to look for our FYI sites later and you can't find them, they're all going to be here. So tonight we're going to work in the category of decision tools and software, and once we open that up, it will take us to a new location. And the new location we're going to, sorry Bill, I was just waiting for everybody's internet to catch up, is the worksheet section. And Bill's going to open that up, and you'll see all the tools and decision tools that we have, and Bill's just going to highlight a few of those for us right now.
So the one at the top, the replacement heifer spreadsheet, is the one that Ryan and Amanda will be going through in a little more detail here in the second half of this evening. And then we have a couple of closeout tools. They have closeout right in the title of them. So this Stalker closeout tool is a new one from this past spring, released about the same time as the heifer one. And closeouts are designed for once you have a group or a pen of animals that you took from start to finish, and you have all their expenses and inputs and what you sold them for and those things. You can plug all those numbers into this, and it helps look at your profits, hopefully, or potentially losses. And it also calculates some benchmark production factors to help you evaluate your operation. You do closeouts on enough groups, and you can get some trends for your operation. Some of these spreadsheets do have some YouTube videos that kind of walk you through them. We're going to add some more later as we go. We've got a herd size growth evaluator. That one we got asked by a producer questions about how fast would their herd be able to expand and grow if they just retained only their own heifers and what percent. And so you can plug those kinds of factors in there, and it will show you how fast your cow-calf enterprise could grow. Again, here's a closeout for a feedlot. And then we also have some spreadsheet tools here that are called budgets. And these are more for projection. We plug some numbers in there in the spring, plug in some of our past production kinds of expenses, or our anticipated expenses, our expected performance, and it helps us look at break evens and different things like that. These are simpler. There's not as much detail in some of these budgets as the closeouts. The cow-calf one, enterprise budget is actually more like a closeout type of a tool. We've got our yardage calculator, which helps us calculate overhead and related operating expenses and that daily cost to have an animal around. And on the property in the dry lot housing, typically, we've got our feedlot enterprise budget tool, again, more of a projection type tool. The forage inventory tool is the one that Caroline and I are going to walk you through here in just a little bit. If we go down a little farther, we've got some feed pricing tools. This feed cost comparison, basically you plug in different feeds, their analysis, their prices, and it'll calculate them out based on per pound of protein or per unit of energy, and then it'll rank them for you. So if you're looking at which feedstuffs are a better buy compared to others, you can use this tool to do that with some feedstuff options that you have. Got the hay corn substitution calculator for when hay is short. Can help you look at cost savings when hay is expensive relative to corn for overwintering the beef cow herd. And we are going to be adapting that one with some sheep flock examples here pretty soon as well. Then we've got some forage pricing tools here, standing small grain, standing hay. And this is actually our old hay usage calculator. That was more basic than the current one that we were going to show you here in a little bit. But some of these pricing tools, corn silage in particular and standing hay in particular, they are available both as Excel spreadsheets, and they're also available as both Apple or Android apps for your tablets or smartphones. And then down below here, the last one we'll look at quick is a freezer beef pricing worksheet that walks through the costs associated with selling beef on a hanging weight kind of basis. It shows the production cost for the animal. It shows then the cost for harvest and then cut, wrap, and freeze and those kinds of things. And so you can look at it to help with determining pricing for customers, as well as help looking at the different opportunities for you as far as different sale options. There is a pork one that will be added to this spreadsheet shortly. But as far as the tools that we're going to look at today, if you haven't downloaded anything from the site before, simple way to do it is a right-hand click on the link and then save as, and then it will ask you what do you want to do with it. Your other option would be just to click on it with your left-hand mouse key. What do you want to do? We'll just tell it to open it right up in Excel. And it shows up.
And so also you'll have to notice that on the top, if you've downloaded something for the internet, it's just going to ask you to make sure that you trust that site. So you'll click enable editing, and that will allow this worksheet to be your own and safe for you to work on. This is a forage inventory need sheet that would have been downloaded from the internet, and Bill's just gonna pull up that we have already kind of made as an example, because due to time, it would take us a little bit longer than a half hour or so to go through the whole sheet. But that's what we're going to do tonight. And so we're just going to go through how the sheet is organized, and then we're going to demonstrate a few different ways to put information in. So we have a scenario that we created for our work tonight, and I think Bill's going to pull that up.
And so to kind of walk through the spreadsheet, we've got an example farm, and just to give you an idea of our situation here, we have 65 mature cows. We got 10 first and second calf cows that are still growing themselves. We've got 7 heifers that will be calving in the spring. We've got 6 heifers that we retained from the calf crop this past fall. They're still around that we're going to keep for replacement. And then we've got 3 bulls.
So that's our animal side of our scenario, and our feed side of the scenario is we have some really mature grass hay. It could have been some road ditch hay, or maybe some CRP grass. It's just not a very good nutritional value. And then we have some other hays, and we've categorized these based on their nutritional value. And also we have to make sure that we know that this is not a balancing ration balancing software. We'll have had to do that prior to beginning in this worksheet. But this is what we have on hand, some full bloom grass hay, some mixed hay, and some early bloom. And then we also have some corn silage that we could get from the neighbor. In this scenario, we will not have produced silage of our own, but we have a way to get that, and we're going to calculate how much silage we will need to purchase. And then another aspect we're going to show you is how to calculate a tonnage of feed. So it's not normally used to calculate pounds of feed, but we're going to do that, and we're going to show you that in corn grain. But we're going to know that it's going to calculate in tons instead of bushels. So we have to do some calculating there.
Okay, so when you open up the spreadsheet, there's a number of colored tabs across the bottom that are different components. And don't get nervous. Most people probably are not going to need to use all of those tabs. And we have throughout also the spreadsheet a number of these green shaded boxes that give guidance and suggestions and some directions on how you can use the tool. As Caroline mentioned, this is not a ration balancing tool, but what we did compared to our old one is we did build in situations to categorize the forage inventory based on the different qualities or the different packages. The old one, it was sort of a one size fits all, and the intake was sort of a basic, everybody was assumed to eat certain percent of their body weight, and we know that's not necessarily true, nor is it necessarily how we would feed cows. So we built flexibility into this one to try to encourage and help people match up their forages to those different production times when animal needs are different. For most people, the two sheets that they're going to use would be the baled inventory and summary, the forage needs sheet, and then possibly some of the silage calculators. If you're familiar with some of those that Brian Holmes has put together and had for many years, we put them all in one place for kind of a one-stop shop. The other information here on the introduction and directions that is going to be of importance to you. When we use this, when we look at forage needs, we want people to use both what they expect the cow to eat and also what the cow is going to waste through our different feeding methods, because if we don't take that into account, we may end up short on forage. And when we're using our inventory sheet, we're also going to plug in some numbers for storage losses as well. So if we look here, we've got a couple of charts up at the top that Caroline's put a nice box on for us. Those are for baled forages, storage losses. You can see the different storage types and the losses there. And on the right side, we've got some different dry matter losses for different silage storage methods and their range of losses. And then if we scroll down a little more, we'll see we've got some feeding losses for baled forages, both with some type of a feeder from some research at Michigan State, and then from feeding on the ground, rolling out the bales on the ground. That was some work done at the University of Missouri. You will see we don't have any feeding losses for silage because we were not able to find anything, but it would be important to build in some percent loss for that. May not be very high depending on your feeding method, or could be quite high. So those are some things to keep in mind. The next thing we'll take a look at here is we'll look at two of these silage tonnage calculators, and then we'll go back to the two main pages of the tool here. So
just in case if you do use silage on your farm, like Bill said, there are 4 different calculators there that you can use to calculate some tonnage as fed for your silage. As in many spreadsheets made by UW-Madison, the blue cells are where you'll put your information, and the yellow cells are protected, and that is where the spreadsheet will do its calculations and where your math will show up. Also, as Bill said before, there are some shaded areas that give you directions in case you can't quite remember what we said tonight on how to use that information. This silage bag calculator is divided into 3 sections, and on the top part, you'll only need to know 4 numbers. So silage moisture content, which you'll get from a forage test. And if you're not quite sure what it is, you could talk with your extension agent about what a normal number would be. The dry matter density, there's a section below on the 3rd section, how to come up with that number, and you'll just need to measure off a length of the bag where you've removed some feed and weigh that, and then you'll be able to calculate the density. It'll calculate it for you. And then just the length and the diameter of the bag, and once you enter in those numbers, you'll come up with the tons as fed number, and this number is what you would enter on the baled inventory sheet at the beginning, and we'll show you that in a little bit. So pretty easy to use, just need a few simple numbers. Bill?
Okay, the other one that we'll take a look at here is our silage pile calculator. And again, these are adapted from work that Brian Holmes did. There's a few more numbers you need here with this one. As with most of our spreadsheet tools on the beef site and the livestock site, again, the blue cells are where you plug in and the yellow cells are where it does all the math for you. We've got a nice drawing here that shows you and describes all the measurements that you need to take to help you collect those, and then you enter them in over here. Again, we'll need moisture and we'll need some different measurements of the silage pile itself, and then it will calculate the tons as fed. And this spreadsheet works off tons as fed as it does all the math for you. The same with this one as with the silage bag and the other ones, except for the upright silo one, but we do have a density calculator. And as Caroline mentioned, you need to know your moistures and you need to know your densities for the bag and the pile and the bunker. And the closer you are to your actual numbers, the more accurate this number is going to be for getting you an estimate of what's in the pile. So again, we've got a density calculator, and it tells you what you need to do. You need to remove so much forage, plug in the moisture, and what length. And the way this silage pile one is, it actually is calculating your density off of the main part of the pile, not the ramp at the front or the back, but the main part of the pile is the way the equations are set up to calculate your density to get your number for your particular silage pile. And again, the more accurate you can be, the better number you're going to have here. So we'll move back to the baled inventory and summary page here, and Carolyn will walk us through that.
Okay, so being on the baled inventory summary sheet, this summary sheet is divided into two main categories. It'll be the baled inventory forages up in the top here. And then we have ensiled feeds on the bottom. So I just want to show you just a couple categories in the way that the data table is set up. So in this left box category, you'll have the description of your hay, and we've just named them according to their maturity as when we harvested them, but you can go ahead and name them however you would like so that you know which hay they are. Across the top here, we have some bale weights, and then I'll show you in a few seconds how to enter in some bale weights. And then going across, we'll see that we need an average bale weight, and that will be calculated by the spreadsheet. And you'll also need to enter in the number of bales and a storage loss. And as Bill showed us at the beginning, there is a chart that can help you determine your storage loss. And then here on the end is a section where you will come back after you have entered all your data, and this is where it'll be doing some analyzing for you. So it'll show you the as tons fed that you have available to feed, and then as fed tons needed, and it gets that needed column from the forage needs sheet that we'll do next. And then the surplus or deficit will tell you how much feed you're over or under. And then you'll also notice that we do have some numbers in there, and those numbers are showing up right now because we have already pre-entered some information for our calf scenario. All right, so the thing that we'll have to do is go ahead and list our numbers, but then we have to come up with some bale weights. And there are two ways that you can do that. And you'll notice that in this first example, we have one bale weight entered at 750. And we could have come by that number by weighing a whole trailer load of hay and then dividing it by the number of bales. And so we already really know the average weight, and so we only have to enter in the 750. And moving across, we would enter in the number of bales, sorry Bill, at 60 bales. And then we have the average of 750. That's easy to do in a storage loss of 90%. Another way that we can enter in the information is to individually weigh 5 representative bales of that kind of hay that we're weighing. So as you notice, we have a bale that weighed 913, 926, 872, 938, and 935. We entered those 5 bales, and it went ahead and calculated the average bale weight of 917. And then entering in the number of bales we have, a storage loss because we're storing them maybe a little bit different. And so Bill's just going to show you really quick how to enter in the information really easy. You just select the cell that you want to enter information in. And as we said before, the blue cells are where you're free to enter in your information. And then clicking on cells is really easy if you haven't used Excel before. But Bill's entering in a group of maybe some small square bales that he had available to put in. 53 is your next one. There you go, Bill, and 48. And then you'll see the numbers change as he enters in information, and that's the spreadsheet doing the mathematical formulas that have already been entered. So pretty easy how to enter in different types of baled hay.
And in the bottom section here is our ensiled feeds from our piles, bags, bunkers, uprights, whatever silage storage we have now. If you remember from our example, we said we were bartering from some corn silage from the neighbor. Maybe we did some field work for them and we're trading for some corn silage for our cows. And so what we're doing here is we're plugging in the corn silage. We know we're going to need it, but we're not going to enter in an inventory. And then what it's going to do is it's going to calculate out as we plug in our needs and the forage needs, how many tons of that feed we're actually going to need. And then we'll know how many tons we'll need to get from the neighbor. The other thing that we're going to do here is, while this is really designed for, initially designed for forages, we can use it to do some calculations with some grain. The thing we need to remember is when we're looking at these is always read the top of the columns as far as what units of measurement we're looking at here. So we're looking at tons. In our corn grain scenario on our farm, we've got 45,000 bushels. In storage, we know we're going to use some of that corn to feed the cows. We'd like to know how much we need to keep back in case we get some good pricing opportunities. We know how much we can forward price and take care of that. So if we convert 45,000 bushels to tons, that calculates out to 1,260 tons. And we might have about a 3% loss in storage. And so you can see here, we do have, as Carolyn indicated, some numbers already plugged in ahead of time for convenience and time's sake. And then this number is going to change when we enter in some of the additional ones. So, but if you had several bags of corn silage, we might put corn silage in one line and we might add the tons of all the bags together and put it in one line. And if we had a pile, that might be another line. If we had some silage or whatever, those could be entered in here. But we can kind of cheat the system if we know what we're doing a little bit, so to speak, and put other feeds in tons just to kind of see what needs would be, which is what we're showing you here. So now if we go to our next tab, that'll be the forage needs, where we plug in our expected needs for the cows for the duration of the hay feeding, forage feeding period.
So this sheet is just divided into a few different areas. As always, the top has some information, some directions. The first little category here is the daily total forage requirement and the disappearance. So that means the pounds that we're putting in per head per day, plus our loss from our storage method, or our feeding method, excuse me. And then that's going to show us your total daily disappearance per head. So that's important to know to make sure that we're getting enough feed in front of our cows. The next section, I'm just going to highlight it really quick if I can find my highlighter, is this category here. And if you'll notice, everything that we entered on the first page, on the inventory page, is going to show up here. And as we do the calculating is going to run down the length of the page. So that's kind of how this sheet is working here. And also, if Bill would scroll down for me a little bit while we're talking, going across the page, there are different feeding groups. And you can see those different feeding groups that we have. We're going to enter in that first mature cow feeding group, but you can see below we have the first and second calf heifer feeding group, the bred heifer feeding group, and below that would be our weaned cow. So these are the, this is how many groups that you can enter. So if you have more groups than this, you might have to decide how to get creative in adding them together. But like before, we're going to click on our blue cell, and we're going to label this feeding group our mature cows. And then we had 65 head of those. Now we're going to enter in the rations, and we're going to have 3 different rations for feeding these cows throughout the winter. So we're going to name the categories. After weaning is how we're going to name this first group, but you can go ahead and name them however you want. We will have started this group on November 15th, and we're going to feed through January 3rd. And once Bill enters in that number, you'll see that the days on feed will automatically calculate. And then the next feeding date, start date for the next ration will have been calculated as well. Our next feeding group will be our late gestation. And I just want to mention that we balanced these rations before with the idea that our cows were at the body condition score of 5, and then we want to push them up to a 6 because this is the most effective and efficient time to gain weight on our cows. And then we're going to feed that group until March 31st. And if you can watch the numbers change, there we go. And our third group will be after calving. So right after they calve and right before we put them out onto pasture until May 10th. We're just assuming that right now your dates may be different and you can change them and put in whatever days work for your feeding operation. And there we can calculate the total number of days on feed. That's really important to look at this next section. We're going to be entering in the individual feed rations as pounds per head per day. Sorry. And that first ration was 14 pounds of our older hay and 37 pounds of silage and 5 pounds of corn. Our second ration would have been 33 pounds of full bloom hay. And as we get farther into our gestation, we're going to feed our better nutritional hay, 2.9. And then our last one would be 44 pounds of the mid-bloom grass hay. And also notice, just for benefit of the group, we would have had some DDGs in these rations, but we're not going to show you how to do those, but it would be similar to calculating the corn and needs. All right, and as you see, the tool has already calculated the numbers and so now it's moved to tons of feed that we will need to procure for the winter. All right, and if we scroll down the page, since we have entered in all of those other feeding groups, it's going to have a grand total of the tons needed right here in this row here. And if we move back to the baled inventory and summary page, we will see those numbers show up again. And then here we can see that our numbers have changed a little bit because we added some feed need, and we can now see our deficits or our surplus of feeds.
Right, and so in this situation, you see we didn't have quite as much of that poor quality hay to get the main cow herd through that after weaning time frame. But with as small of a difference as this is, you know, it'd be pretty easy in this situation to just, we've got extra of the next quality hay, just kind of fill in the gap there. If this was quite a bit bigger number and it was a longer duration, then we might look at adjusting the rations to be more economical. Maybe wouldn't need quite as much corn silage from the neighbor, or cut back on the pounds of corn, whatever works out best, you know, working with either your own ration calculations or working with your nutritionist to come up with good rations. Again, this tool does not balance rations. It helps us allocate forages and make sure we've got enough forages to get through the wintertime. As we talked about earlier, with the corn silage, we were bartering that from the neighbor and we weren't quite sure how much, but this gives us a pretty good idea that we're gonna probably need to get about 67 tons from the neighbor. And as we talked about the corn in storage, when we work all the rations into this, we're gonna need about just shy of 20 tons of the corn in the bin. But that tells us that we can go ahead and, you know, price and sell 1,200 tons, which we can convert back to bushels, and know that we're in good shape and have retained enough to get the cows through. The last sheet that I want to show you in here, and again, all these are different color tabs across the bottom to move back and forth, is a voluntary intake calculator that we built into this. And this is designed, this is also not for balancing rations. It gives us an idea how much different feedstuffs could the cow eat if we let her have all she wanted all the time. You know, we always hear kind of that general rule of thumb of somewhere in that 2 to 2.5% in dry matter basis. And really, rather than dry matter basis. And that's kind of based on a forage with a neutral detergent fiber somewhere in that 45 to 55% range. But in high forage diets, neutral detergent fiber is actually the limiting factor. And kind of a rule of thumb is the cow will eat about 1.1% of their body weight a day in neutral detergent fiber. Now, the digestibility of that fiber will have some influence on it. If it's highly digestible, they might be able to eat up to 1.4%. If it's very undigestible neutral detergent fiber, it may be as low as 1, but the calculator uses a kind of a 1% or 1.1% of their body weight a day to give you an idea. So you could use this to see how much can the cow eat, look at the quality of it, does it meet the cow's needs or not, from that aspect. But again, it's truly not a ration balancing tool, but it can help you with intake just to see if they can eat or how much they would eat of that feed. So we've got some examples here. All of our animal weights are the same. We've got a first cut grass legume hay at 55%. We've got corn stalks, which are 70% neutral detergent fiber. And then we've got a fall oat crop that we were able to harvest early and nice and lush and is low in fiber. And you can see that's the estimated pounds of dry matter that they would be able to eat a day on a high forage ration. You can plug in a moisture and it'll calculate that to as fed pounds a day. And that, that's how much the cow is going to voluntarily eat till she feels comfortably full. Plug in a feeding loss, and you'll figure out how many tons you might need of these feeds over some time. But, we still need to be looking at this from a balanced ration standpoint. This would just be, is the hay, can the cow eat enough, and is the hay good enough to meet her needs? That would tell us if that's possible or not. But it should be used in combination with looking at a good solid balanced ration for the animals. So this is an overview of our forage inventory and needs tool. Again, we added some features to help be able to allocate forages better based on their quality and animal needs as you work your calculations and needs for your herd. I'm going to turn it back to Sandy.
Thank you, Bill. And if anyone has some questions for what was just covered, please go ahead and type that into the chat.
So my question was, when do you weigh the bales? When first baled or after storage?
Well, anytime you can weigh them that's convenient is going to be better than not weighing them and guessing. We do know there probably would be a little bit of weight loss, right after baling, but again, whenever is the best, most convenient time for you to do it, I would weigh them.
I guess I would be curious to ask, if you want to put this in the chat, is there any information, topics, speakers that you want us to cover at future sessions? It's always good to get some feedback from our audience to find out what it is that you want to hear about. So if you have speakers or topics that you want covered, go ahead and put them in the chat box.
One of the topics for future meetings is calling versus vitamin and mineral supplementing and cost-effective methods to bring your feeders to weight naturally. Well, good news as far as the vitamin and mineral supplementing topics. On January 12th, we will have Dr. Steffi Hansen from Iowa State University talking to us about vitamin and mineral supplementing and requirements, not only for the cow-calf enterprise, but also for the feedlot. So tune in join us that night for that information.
And I just put that on the screen share to remind you of that date, and also to add in that on this particular evening, there will be Beef Quality Assurance Continuing Education credits available for those of you who want to work on renewing your BQA. You can do that. You can earn 1 CE credit by attending in person. You can't earn it by watching the recorded session later. You have to actually join with us. And again, anybody who needs to get a hold of any of us, here's our contact information. It's all at wisc.edu. You just got to know how to spell our names. Good luck with that. So are there any other comments in the chat? Because now that I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat.
So we have a one-stop shop for all of your winter webinar needs and information from Extension at UW. So all the webinars are free, and you're free to register for as many as you'd like and make sure that you get topics that you want. And I'm sure that you went to hear when you signed up for our session tonight, but more have been added as we go along. So if you run down the page, here are some more topics throughout the month of March, and I think some are scheduled into April. So we have some beef and dairy, farm management, small ruminant with sheep and goats topics.
So we meet again on January 12th, and then we are also participating in the Driftlifts Beef Conference, which is beginning on January 26th. You register for that on a separate location. And then we join back up with our beef special editions in February. February 9th would be the next one then with Dr. Dan Thompson. And then our March is on March 9th, and that one I believe is with Dr. Dorfer for Harry Heelwort.
That's February 23rd.
February 23rd, see? Gotta let Carolyn do it.
That's okay. And then in March, we have our pasture weed management. And then we'll be doing a co-hosting one with a small ruminant group where we'll be looking at direct marketing and some meat sweets from Cornell. And that will wrap up our winter series.
So again, thank you all for joining us this evening.
I'd just like to say, feel free to reach out to us by email if you have questions for us at a later time, or would just like to communicate with us individually. We're open for you guys to do that. So just, if you forget our emails, just can search us at the Livestock Topic Hub underneath the People section. Thank you. Have a great night.